don't create psychopaths. Movies make psychopaths more creative. Good evening and welcome back to Venom's Vault, the podcast where I talk about drag, horror, and my other niche interests. I'm your hostess, Venom, the plus-size vampire MILF of South Texas, and today I'm giving you a little bit of goth drag. Don't clock the fact that my hands aren't the same color as my face. I'm aware I could not find my white gloves. But anyways, tonight we are going to open the wardrobe of villainy and delve into one of horror's most underrated storytelling tools, costuming. Tonight, I talk about all things leather, lace, and latex, and all of our favorite horror villains such as Chucky, Ghostface, Leatherface, American Mary, Art the Clown, Tiffany, and some others for our grand finale. Let's open up the closet and pick up that glass of wine again, and let's get into it. So let's start with Ghostface and Leatherface. So Ghostface is really what inspired my look for today's episode on the podcast, but then it kind of just got dragged off into like the goth territory, which I don't mind at all. I love goth makeup. I love the stark white face with all of like the black detailing. I decided to do a spiderweb, venom, spiders, and then I decided to wear these knife earrings that my boyfriend made for me. And I'm very excited because Ghostface from Scream is the blueprint for anybody can be under that mask, really. The costume, it's chic, it's black, it's flowy, and it is very anonymous. You don't know who's under there because there is no gender specific kind of elements to the costume. It is very unisex, it is very universal, and you never know who is hiding underneath the Ghostface mask. The thing that I really love about the Ghostface character is that it is basically a blank slate for chaos. You don't know if it's a man, a woman, a non-binary pal underneath the costume, but no matter what, they're always so shocking and they carry themselves with such killer edge. So moving on to Leatherface, or Bubba as I like to call him, originating in Tobe Hooper's 1974 now masterpiece, The Texas Chainsaw Massacre. In almost every iteration of The Texas Chainsaw Massacre, it is usually that Leatherface is being taken advantage of. He is being used for his size, used for his lack of intelligence, which is unfortunate because he is essentially being manipulated by his entire family to kill. He is the muscle and no brains. And it's really sad to see because most of the time, he's really not a bad person. He just does what his family says. And at the end of the day, all he wants is to make his family proud, which a lot of people can definitely relate to. However, what makes Bubba so terrifying is that he does not know his strength. He is extremely tall and powerful, and he overpowers so many people throughout the franchise. What Leatherface always seems to circle back around to is that he is a normal man with a mental debilitation and a manipulative family that tells him to do all of their dirty work because of his sheer strength and power that he possesses naturally. But the thing that I love most about Leatherface's costume is that it's functional. The face is scary because he's wearing somebody else's face. He even ventures into drag in some of the sequels, which I really love. In Texas Chainsaw Massacre, The Next Generation, he is in full drag, complete with a breastplate and a fresh wig and really sloppily done makeup, but he looks fierce, okay? And that's what I love is that there's always different interpretations of Leatherface and Texas Chainsaw Massacre as it is, with its numerous remakes and sequels. Some of my favorites would probably be the 2003 and 2006 remake and reboot, because it is so interesting and it is so 2000s. Early 2000s was such an interesting time for horror, and I think that what it does do successfully is it reinvents the character that we haven't seen in such a long time. I mean, at the time, of course. Every single iteration that we see of Leatherface, it gives a different taste of backwoods brutality vibes, because no matter what iteration, it is always the same core concept, but we constantly see this character evolution or growth, if you will, because every single different rendition of Leatherface does something different. Although it is the same basic costume being Butcher Couture, he has a resourceful apron, he's being resourceful by using his victim's face as a mask, but there is always a different kind of flair, like I mentioned. There's the 80s campy rendition where he's in full drag, and then there's the Texas Chainsaw 3D where he wears a sloppy red button down and a brown apron. I love that Leatherface has different sorts of directions whenever it comes to costuming the killer killer. And that's what this episode is all about. I want to talk to you about my favorite sort of renditions of costuming the killer, if you will. So when it comes to Leatherface and Ghostface, the thing that they have in common is that although they have the same staple structure in terms of their costume and their mask, they are always slightly different with every iteration. Whenever it comes to Ghostface, there's not much done to the actual mask, to the actual garment, as we see in the later renditions. The things that we do see is that it's a little bit more withered and cracked, sort of like Michael Myers sort of vibe. But with Leatherface, there is truly endless possibilities to do the same thing, because you can really have anybody's face on your face, if you will, and you can have any kind of apron, you can wear anything under the apron. So there's really endless possibilities to these two staple killers. So moving on to our next segment, I'm going to be talking about Chucky and Tiffany, the killer dolls. So whenever it comes to Chucky's design, he has a rainbow striped shirt, that's a long sleeve, and some overalls that say good guy on it. He's a doll after all. And the thing that I think is so iconic about the Chucky character is the red hair. I think that is a very interesting choice, and that's what makes him stand out. He's a redhead, he's wearing Farmer in the Dale overalls, and he's wearing a striped long sleeve shirt that's rainbow colored. You really wouldn't suspect something so sinister underneath the doll-like appearance. I love the raspy voice that the character has. And moving on to his partner, Tiffany Valentine, Tiffany Ray, whatever you want to call her, Jennifer Tilly, my idol, as I like to call her. She adds such a great flair to the Child's Play franchise. And more talking about her doll appearance, I love 1998's Bride of Chucky because the look is so grunge and so 90s. She's wearing a wedding dress that she slits up the middle just to show her fishnets and combat boots underneath, as well as this really sick looking leather jacket, complete with the blonde hair that just has some dark roots to it. And it is so uniquely Jennifer Tilly, while at the same time really following what Chucky's bride would actually look like in this universe. And that is what I love so much about their costumes, is that they're so unique and they look like they probably wouldn't go together, but that's what makes it worthwhile. I love how their costumes contrast but also complement each other as Chucky and his bride, Tiffany Valentine. So whenever I look at Tiffany Valentine, I see the stark 90s and grunge influence to her costume. I was going to say her drag, but I love the pencil thin 90s eyebrows. I love the dark smoky eye. I love the overlined cupid's bow and the dark red, maroon, purplish looking lips. And of course the iconic Marilyn mole right on the top of her lip. And that's what makes Tiffany Valentine such an iconic character. She follows the trends of the time period while looking grungy and gothic, but also remaining extremely unique. And that's something that a lot of people like to recreate nowadays, because Tiffany is one of the Halloween costumes that I see coming back year after year. And I really don't think that they're going out of style anytime soon, because like Tiffany Valentine always says, a true classic never goes out of style. So we are just about hitting the halfway mark of episode 4 of Venom's Vault, Dressed to Kill, and I would like to introduce a new segment on this show entitled Venom's Victim of the Week. So in this segment, I will be including one of the kills from a horror media that I really love, and this week, Venom's Victim of the Week is Chanel No. 2 from Scream Queens 2015. So Chanel No. 2 is played by Ariana Grande, pop princess to the people, if you will, also most recently seen as Glinda in Wicked the movie. Still waiting for Wicked for Good to come out, but that's another story. And so in Scream Queens, we have these sorority sisters being haunted and killed off one by one by the sorority mascot, the Red Devil. He plagues Kappa Kappa Tau for an entire season before season 2 kind of the wheels fall off the basket and we go to the Cure Institute, but that's a story for another time. I really do love her death because it is so unique, and it is also very meta of the time, because she gets a notification on her phone. It's the Red Devil. He comes into her room and they kind of text and dance along the line of murder for a while. And of course, finally, it's time for her to die. So she gets stabbed in the shoulder. She falls to the floor. She crawls to her laptop in agony. She picks her laptop up off the table. She's typing on it, please help me, please help me. And then gets stabbed right through the skull in true Scream Queen fashion. And before she's able to hit send on her Facebook post, she collapses, but she comes right up, hits post, and then dies for good. And that's what I really love about this death, is that it's so scary and it's very impactful, yet it's still campy. It has that element of suspension of disbelief that we all kind of have to follow whenever it comes to watching theater, or it comes to watching a TV show or a film. And although that probably never would happen in real life, I love the fact that Ryan Murphy really took it there and included that element within the show. And that's why she is Venom's very first victim of the week. Do you have a kill that you just really love and would want me to talk about? Go ahead and DM me on Instagram at venom.reanimated, or send me an email at venom.reanimated@gmail.com for any kind of victim or kill that you would like to see me cover in a future episode of Venom's Vault. I am anxiously anticipating your response. So moving on to the latter half of Dress to Kill, I want to talk about two more recent and iconic horror movie villains. The Red Devil from Scream Queens 2015, Season 1 to be specific, and Art the Clown from the Terrifier franchise, originating in 2016. Although I believe Art the Clown's original appearance was in an anthology film that Damien Leone made called All Hallows Eve, which I did watch with my mother about a year ago, and it was so interesting but freaky, but that's a story for a different time. So moving right along to the Red Devil. He's red, he's iconic, and it's another one of those anonymous characters. What these whodunit franchises really have in common is that they have a staple look that really anybody can be lurking below the mask. And that's what's so interesting, because in Scream Queens, it is more of a whodunit mystery. And of course, the show is a horror comedy, it's a black comedy, it's silly, it's campy, but at its core, it is still a horror mystery. So what I love about the Red Devil is that he has such a iconic look that I really haven't seen in other horror franchises. What I love so much about the Red Devil is that he really does have a unique look to him. It is this devil mask with these elongated horns and this really carved skeletal bone structure that he has. And then moving on to the costume, it is this really big, dramatic red cape with this also plastic looking kind of chest piece that emulates a six-pack. But as we find out, a spoiler alert for Scream Queens, that there are feminine figures lurking below the masculine facade. Conversely, Damien Leone's Art the Clown in the Terrifier franchise adds something completely new to the clown genre. Typically, we see clowns in horror like Pennywise or Killer Clowns from Outer Space having such geometric and colorful looks to them. And of course, the signature clown suit where it's just really baggy and really balloon looking. And that is seen within Art the Clown. But what Art the Clown has going for it that is entirely different in comparison to these other iconic horror clowns such as Pennywise from It and the Killer Clowns from Outer Space from Killer Clowns from Outer Space, Jumbo, Bigums, whatever you want to call them, is that it's a grayscale mime killer. They don't talk, they don't make noises. Art the Clown is a completely grayscale pantomime character, and that's what really works to its benefit with its kills, because they are so gruesome and so bloody, but the only noise that we hear comes from the victims, while Art the Clown is mimishly laughing at all of the horror that he's inflicting and the pain that he's causing to these innocent people. What makes Art the Clown stand out amongst these other iconic clowns of horror, which it is really hard to make one nowadays because almost every idea has sort of been taken, and so to make a really unique, distinct, and more so iconic horror clown, Damien Leone really had to think outside the box. The Terrifier franchise is such a big gore fest of camp and silliness, but also just so scary. I personally enjoy the original Terrifier the most, although it being the most low budget film of all three of them. I think that there was something so special about what was created during that time, and it really gave way for the new upper budget Terrifier 2 and 3 movies, and I'm super excited for the end of the saga in Terrifier 4, if that really is the end, of course. So overall, the things that make the Red Devil and Art the Clown so iconic, especially being newer additions to the horror family and the horror realm, is that they have something distinct going for them. I've never really seen a comical rendition of a devil-inspired character until until I saw Scream Queens, and I've never quite seen a completely grayscale pantomime killer clown the way I've seen in art, and that's what I really love. These characters are so unique and different, and that's really something that we need and cherish more than ever today in the horror world. Next up, American Mary, 2012. Let's get surgical. So American Mary is a really underrated Canadian film, and I classify it as a horror film, and a lot of people like to classify it in other types of genres, which I definitely understand, but it is a horror gem that I really love because we see Catherine Isabel, which you might recognize from Ginger Snaps as Ginger Fitzgerald, and other films such as, this is going to be such a cheesy one, but Another Cinderella Story starring Selena Gomez and Emily Perkins as well. That's where I definitely remember Catherine Isabel from growing up, but she's such a great actor, and I'm really loving the fact that she got another lead role in 2012's American Mary, which is, like I said, a Canadian film. And although it wasn't super mainstream, I think that the concept behind it is super interesting and, like I said, very unique. We see Mary Mason struggling to live in New York City and afford medical school, and we see her go to apply at a strip club, and from that she just happens to be in the right place at the right time because a man gets shot in the face, and so she has to do emergency surgery on him while in basically lingerie, which is so badass and iconic, and she gets $5,000, and just like that, some of her debt is lifted off her shoulders. And following this event, we see Beatrice, which is Betty Boop inspired. I love the way she looks. She has the cute little Betty Boop look and the cute little nose, and she's just so cute and gorgeous. And thank you. That was an amazing impersonation. I'm here all week. Anyways, I digress. So we see this Beatrice slash Betty Boop. I'm going to call her Betty Boop because she literally is supposed to be Betty Boop inside the franchise. And we also see another friend of hers. I'm going to call her Barbie. You see, there's so many kind of imitation impersonation characters in this movie, so if I say Betty Boop and Barbie, I'm just gonna have to trust that you've seen American Mary, okay, because it is such a wild ride. But I digress. Let's get into Mary's costume. So traditionally, Mary just has this straight black hair with the blunt bang, which is honestly so fierce. I'm gonna say, bring back the blunt bang. You heard it here first on Venom's Vault. Bring back the blunt bang. I've not seen enough of them in recent years. And then she also has these PVC and leather elements to her wardrobe, which I really love. There's such a vintage element to who Mary Mason is. And that's something that I think also sets her apart, because there is such a beauty in this sort of pinup style. And even whenever she went to go apply at the strip club, she had a pinup sort of look. And it wasn't just a regular old bikini. She had her own leggings and stocking and garter belt. And she was performing the surgery on the shot man, which is so iconic and so badass in my opinion. But I digress, like I said. The way Mary's costumes just are so unique to what I usually see in horror films is just a testament to the artistic vision that I believe American Mary executed. I feel like this is just me, but a part of my drag style is so rooted and inspired by this vintage horror pinup fantasy. And that's what I love that American Mary executes so well. It's like, personally, I love seeing a fully tatted up pinup girl. I love seeing a pinup girl who's missing a limb because she's a zombie. And I think that that's what American Mary really aims to do, because Mary Mason herself looks so vintage, put together, red lipstick, again, the Marilyn mole right above the lip with this dark, sleek hair and a blunt bang. But the things that she's doing, she's performing body modifications that are so extreme. She's including implants to look like horns. She's switching people's arms. She's splitting people's tongues. And those things are so grotesque to most people. But I think that that's really what adds to the artistic vision of the film, by incorporating Mary, who is such a beautiful girl, doing these super grotesque and outside the box and eclectic surgeries. And personally, my favorite American Mary costume that just comes immediately to my head whenever I think of her are black latex gloves, black latex apron, red mini dress, and of course the signature blunt bangs, long hair, red lipstick, and Marilyn mole, of course. So overall, American Mary really does serve you surgical realness. I think that she is just so fierce, and I would really love to see Catherine Isabel portray this character again in the future. I mean, I'm not sure if she would. I'm pretty sure I'm just wishful thinking. However, I really would love to see another rendition or other films like this. So if you have any recommendations of films that are similar to American Mary, or you would like to request something for me to cover on a future episode of Venom's Vault, my DMs and email are always open. And finally, rounding out this episode of Venom's Vault, for the grand finale, I'm going to be talking about some of my favorite Cenobites from the mind of the famous Clive Barker in the Cenobites of Hellraiser. I'm going to be talking about Pinhead, of course, the most iconic Cenobite, if you will, Butterball, Angelique, Female, and the Chatterer, my favorite Cenobites. So beginning with Pinhead, honestly, he's so unique and iconic, just as the rest of these characters that I previously talked about are. But what I really love about Pinhead is that he's been played by so many different people. And of course, we think of the iconic 1980s version of Hellraiser whenever we first think of Pinhead. But more recently, he's been played in 2022 by a female, which I thought was extremely interesting. And so his costume just... he's honestly a drag icon. Honestly, all of the Cenobites are drag icons, and I'm going to tell you why. Because Pinhead merges this really grotesque look with fashion, pleasure, pain, and that's what the Cenobites encapsulate and embody. And that's what makes them so iconic. And moving right along to Butterball, he is the most intelligent Cenobite. I bet you didn't know that. And he is honestly... the most sickening. Like, he just has these shades on. He's a plus size icon. He looks fierce. He's wearing leather, and I don't care that he's almost busting out of it. He looks fierce, okay? And moving right along to Angelique, I'm almost speechless because she is so iconic as well. She has her entire cranium opened up and strapped to her shoulders. How iconic is that? And then we have Female, who was a sin-obsessed nun before she became a Cenobite, and her entire throat is slashed open and it is being pinned back by wire that goes into her mouth, and she has this raspy voice, and she's bald. The Cenobites are just so creatively designed, and I wanted to save this as the grand finale because this is what springboarded this entire episode. The fashion that we see in the Hellraiser franchise really set the bar for horror of the modern day, and that's why we're able to see so many iconic characters like Chucky and Tiffany having their own sort of eclectic style. We see Art the Clown being so different from the other killer clowns that we know and love in horror. We see the Red Devil bringing something new and unique to the table as a mascot, completely different from what Leatherface and what Ghostface are bringing to the horror table. And the last Cenobite that I wanted to talk about is the Chatterer. He has such a fierce looking bodysuit, and he doesn't talk, he chatters. He chatters his teeth to communicate. He is literally doing the most while saying no words. And honestly, that is iconic. If I could just pin back my entire face and just... I sure would. And period, I mean it. And so at the end of the day, these horror icons are so amazingly costumed, and it is probably one of the biggest storytelling elements that a lot of people leave out whenever they talk about what horror villains mean to them. Yes, they have an amazing personality. Yes, they have iconic films that probably have too many sequels, but the thing that I really wanted to focus on this episode is that they all have iconic and distinguishable costumes. And that's what really makes drag as well. You can have the best personality, the best performance quality, but you have to have a costume to match. And that's why I wanted to come on here today and show you some of my goth drag, because this is something that is really inspiring to me. I love different costumes. I love fashion, and especially on a plus size person. That's why I went off so hard for Butterball, because he's a plus size icon still wearing this leather and PVC stuff that all of the other skinny Cenobites are wearing. And that's iconic. Also being the most intelligent, something I relate to, just because, you know, I have to be, you know, a goth bimbo, but at the same time I have some kind of smarts, okay? And before we conclude this episode of the podcast, I want to pivot your attention to these fabulous units that Poison and Toxin are wearing. Bitch, where did you get this hair?
You tell me. You're the one that strapped this wig to my head, you fat bitch.
Exactly. I styled every single unit that you see worn on this podcast, even the units that you see on my gorgeous assistants and set pieces, Poison and Toxin. Toxin, I think you look really good in red, honestly. It makes you look like a cheap whore. I crack myself up sometimes, y'all. I'm having so much fun filming this podcast, and I really do feel like I finally got my legs whenever it comes to recording in these episodes. So if you or anybody you know loves drag or loves horror or just loves me and wants to support me, of course, you can always find me on Instagram, on any platform really, at venom.reanimated. That goes for Instagram, that goes for TikTok, and that's pretty much all I have, really. Don't try to find me on anything else because that's weird. All right, just to wrap up, my darlings. So, fashion in horror is not just about looking fierce while you slice and dice. It's about telling a story through somebody's silhouette. Behind every mask, bloodstain, and victim, we get to see who these horror characters and killers truly are. And that's what the moral of today's episode is really about. I love seeing the different sorts of silhouettes and shapes and colors that we see in horror. And whether it's grayscale or black and white or leather and PVC the way we see in Cenobites and Art the Clown, or super colorful like the overalls and rainbow striped shirt that we see in Chucky, or just something straight up badass like Tiffany's wedding dress that's ripped with a slit and her leather jacket with fishnets and combat boots to match. We see something unique in every single horror character that has become iconic over the years. So if you've enjoyed this week's horror fashion massacre, just wait until next week, my darlings, because we are taking a little road trip to Wallace University to uncover the secrets of Kappa Kappa Tau and discover some sorority carnage, if you will. That's right. Next week on Venom's Vault, we are pretty in pink and killed in couture. We are going to be talking about the Chanels, Dean Munch, the Red Devil, where season 1 went right, where season 2 went wrong, and how badly I want a season 3 of Scream Queens. Although I know it would probably never happen just because the cast. Thank you so much for listening, streaming, or watching wherever you get your podcasts, and I will see you next time in the vault. Bye.